Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar. It's 11 o'clock here in the Midwest, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Kelsey Cervantes. I'm a marketing manager here at Zirous, and I'm really pleased to introduce today's topic and speakers to you. A quick housekeeping note before we get started. On the right side of your screen, you'll see a place where you can submit chats and questions. Feel free to do that throughout the presentation. I'll be keeping track of those, and our speakers today will answer those live at the end. So let's get into today's topic, building a cloud adoption strategy for success, creating a cloud adoption roadmap that actually meets business needs. So of course, we know that without technology, cloud would be impossible, but it's important to note that cloud is so much more than just technology. It's really setting up for the future success of your business. 42% of cloud migration failures stem from a lack of planning, and 55% stem from a lack of clear business objectives. So our goal is to help you avoid that problem. This session will dive into how to create a strategy and a few key pieces to get started today. So a little bit about Zirous if you aren't familiar with us already. We're headquartered in West Des Moines, Iowa, and we were established in 1986. And of course, technology has changed a lot between now and then. So we've seen those changes, been through all of those, so we're well equipped to handle today's digital transformation. As you can see on your screen, we have quite a few service offerings that we provide to our clients. Of course, today we'll be talking about cloud adoption, but as we'll touch on a little bit later, a solid cloud foundation can set you up really well for projects in some of these other areas as well. And along the bottom of the screen are some of our partners who help support those practice areas. Today, we'll touch briefly on Microsoft, AWS, and Oracle as our main cloud partners. Our speakers for today are Bruce Yance and Tally Gullickson. Bruce is our Vice President of Infrastructure and Cloud Services at Zirous with over 20 years of experience. He's a visionary when it comes to cloud strategy, identifying new ways to enable the business using technology. Bruce has seen just about every problem in the book from his experience designing, implementing, and supporting critical infrastructure solutions. He specializes in solving business problems and implementing best-in-class technology. Tally is a senior business analyst at Zirous with over 5 years of experience. Tally's expertise is in working with clients to fill the gap between business drivers and technical implementations. Her analytical and problem-solving skills help define strategies to best meet the cloud goals of clients while aligning with best practices and business processes. So before Bruce and Tally dive into the real meat of today's presentation, we wanted to go over why cloud makes sense. And these are things that maybe you've seen before, but they're some of Zirous' favorite cloud benefits. So agility of the cloud allows faster time to market and ability to meet demands. The digital transformation today really demands agility and speed to stay competitive and allows you to take your projects to market faster, boosting your bottom line. Flexibility of the cloud offers many technology options to meet your business needs, so you can adapt to change at the drop of a hat and create a flexible cloud infrastructure that really fits your exact business needs. Scalability of the cloud gets you the space you need when you need it, so you can scale up and down as your business requires without a huge time commitment from your staff, and meet that demand of your customers, again, helping you drive your bottom line of your business. Cost management ties in closely with scalability as you only pay for what you really need to use, and it also allows you to better understand and predict your infrastructure costs. Security is a great benefit of cloud as well. The advanced security teams from your cloud provider or providers are always up to date with patching and maintenance, taking that load off of your internal staff. And then finally, what might be our favorite cloud benefit at Zirous is innovation. And it really is a culmination of all of these other benefits and allows you to set the stage for anything at your business. You can launch new ideas faster and more easily for less money. So a brief overview of what we'll cover today. We'll begin with priming for cloud adoption. What are those high-level things that need to be done to really set the stage? And then next, we'll break that down and go over some of those details and some of the tidbits you can really start with. Next is a story that never ends, cloud enhancements. So once you have that cloud foundation laid, what else can you do with it? And what other business areas can get involved and take advantage of it? And then finally, ready, set, go. What can you do to get started today if you haven't started your cloud adoption process yet, or to make sure you're on the right track? And as Tally and Bruce go through each of these sections, they'll also be giving you some examples of success stories that Zirous has had with our own clients, and also tying those stories into some of the benefits we just discussed on the previous slide. So let's dive in.
So when we say cloud, we often think of just the technology piece. But at Zirous, we like to think of it more as your strategic business-driven infrastructure. So what does your business need in order to thrive, and how can your infrastructure support it? So cloud adoption is really seeing the bigger impact and understanding all the processes and changes that go with it. So before you begin that cloud journey, you want to set yourself up for success with a little bit of priming. And that requires leadership support, founding of your cloud enablement team, and a strong strategy and plan in place to achieve those goals. Gartner stated that a cloud strategy requires support and sponsorship from across the organization, so all of your departments, to really succeed. An IT push alone is not sufficient or broad enough to succeed. So leadership support comes from the executive level. It can start, the cloud adoption process and thought process can start in your IT department, but it really needs that support from the executive level. Once you get moving with your project and process, you really don't want to face uphill battles getting approvals after the fact. So getting that level of leadership on board first before you begin is really key into keeping that momentum going. Like we said, you need all areas of the business involved in this. There's going to be changes that impact almost every area of the business. And so you really want to communicate those changes with those department champions before you begin. Getting them on board and excited about the cloud helps you keep everyone engaged and activated, and then also just ease your transition when the changes do come. And then you'll also want a dedicated sponsor. I mean, all projects need a sponsor of sorts, but this one is especially important. You're going to have a big undertaking involved, and so you really want somebody to stay focused and have their eye on the goal of what you're all doing, so that when the team gets a little distracted by all these other things going on, you can have somebody that takes point and understands the bigger, broader goal. You'll also need a cloud enablement team. And now when we say cloud enablement, this means a team that's dedicated to making those decisions and enabling the cloud to expand throughout your organization. So they'll be included in the technology decisions and how things get rolled out and how other departments are going to be included in this. So this team should really be making those decisions. And to do that, you need diverse team members. So people from all areas with different backgrounds is really important to making those good decisions. Having somebody from a technical background is really important to understanding the networking side of things and how all the applications are connected. But you also need some business people in there to understand how the business users will be impacted and what processes need to change and how that's going to all flow and communicate with each other. So that team really needs to have an understanding of all the different perspectives to really make sound decisions. And this can start small. So you're not undertaking the whole organization all at once. So it could be small to evaluate those initial decisions, and then as it rolls out and as it grows throughout the organization, the team will grow along with it. So you'll get those additional outside perspectives included, and then also be able to promote the knowledge throughout the organization of teaching other people how this is going to change their processes or how it's going to impact their jobs. So it's really important to have this founded before you begin, so that as you make those decisions, it's easier to have a team to go to for them. And you'll also need a strong strategy plan in place before you begin. And this includes understanding the business goals and priorities. So understanding where your organization wants to go and how your IT department and how your cloud can impact that and promote those goals. So having a clear list of this is what we're striving to really helps in providing that clear path. And then you want to understand the current state. So understanding that detailed inventory of the applications and infrastructure that you're currently managing. So understanding where everything's currently stored, how things are connected, all the different databases that you use, and how data flows in between them. Having that clear picture of the current state is really what this application inventory really does. And so you can know this group of applications can move together, or this group of users will be impacted. We need to communicate it to this data owner. That really just gives you a clear picture of the current state. And then you'll move on to defining that roadmap and strategy. So how do you get from your current state to those business goals and priorities? And that's what the roadmap and strategy really lead you to, is how are we going to implement it? Are we going to do a group of lift and shift first? Or are we going to just slowly migrate one by one? It really depends on your business goals and priorities. And so that should be really clear throughout the roadmap and strategy. And it can be a large undertaking. So it's really important to break down your plan into digestible phases. So you have short, key, achievable milestones that you can keep momentum going and keep progress moving while showing the value of the cloud. So you get everybody excited about your new change, and then you can keep moving forward. So it's really important to just not try to swallow the whole ocean, but just slowly break it down and achieve a little bit at a time. And one way we do this at Zirous is with our catalyst process. So we do understand the current state with that detailed assessment of the processes, the systems, all the applications inventory. So we have that clear picture of where you currently are today. Then we look at what's missing. So what's keeping you from achieving your current goals? And we look at all the things that could be potentially moved or added to address those barriers. And then we define that course of action. So this is where the roadmap and strategy come into play. And we define that for you of here's your recommendation for what would be best for your organization. Based on all of these pieces together, it really comes together with this cloud roadmap and strategy. So we recently did this with a large university. Their data contract was up. They weren't sure exactly where to move to. They know they had to move somewhere, but that was kind of a question mark. So we looked at their technologies, and we noticed that there were a lot of aging and redundant technologies. So they were out of support or no longer used, and it wasn't clear of what needed to be moved. There was also some gaps in knowledge and expertise. So the team had just reorganized. There was pockets of information throughout the different team members, but no one had a clear idea of what was really the bigger picture and what was currently being held in that data center. And there's also a lack of standardization. So there's different processes being used to move data or to authenticate or to even develop different applications. There's different processes across the board. So there wasn't a clear understanding of how things should move. So when we talked to the leadership, they agreed that cloud was a strategic move for them. It wasn't hard for us to communicate that, and they were on board with it pretty right away. Then we evaluated their business goals and priorities. What was the most important to them? And they wanted to be more of a managed service provider in their organization. So they wanted to provide services to the different departments of their organization. And so with that in mind, we were able to work towards that goal. And when we were in our planning meetings, the client team really provided some valuable insights. So we got all those little pockets of knowledge out into the big, broader group. So everyone could kind of get on board faster while we were understanding their current state better. And then we worked through that server and application inventory. So we understood all of the applications that they currently hosted, what needed to stay, what needed to move, the different states that they were at, and all the internal processes that were happening. How did data flow between the applications? Were there dependencies? And then even work through their development process of how were they currently making changes to those applications. So all of that together, we were able to provide them that complete application server inventory, and we were able to recommend the Azure Stack to them. It provided them the most flexibility to meet their goals. And with those goals, we were able to provide a strategy and roadmap for their future architecture of how this would look in the future and how we would implement it. And that also included a plan to create that cloud enablement team. The people that were in our initial planning meetings were a perfect group for creating that foundation of the cloud enablement team. So it was a natural progress to be able to recommend how they should form and organize and promote it throughout the organization. Gartner stated by 2022, 70% of organizations will have a formal cloud strategy. Those without a cloud strategy will flounder in their attempts to adopt cloud.
So now you understand the importance of having a solid process in place around understanding what your plan and strategy is. Let's get closer look at the details. So 3 things you want to look at are defining the right technology, knowing what skills and knowledge you need in order to support that technology, and finally, what is the overall time and investment required to make this project a success. So starting with the technology decision process, as mentioned before, with that inventory that was completed, you want to make sure you review every application and service individually to understand a lot of different elements to that. That might include what type of data processing is with that application, the longevity of that application or service, how critical it is to the business, as well as what security requirements are in place for it. Once you have that understood, you want to look at what the right path for each of your applications are and define that. Rehost would be a good option if you want to make minimal changes to the application and just lift and shift it to the cloud. Replatform would be a good way to leverage some cloud functionality and make minimal application changes and get to a cloud platform service. Refactor would take a little bit more work and make more changes to the application, but leverage a lot more cloud benefits in the end when you move to a cloud service. Or maybe it's time to reevaluate the application as a whole and redesign it and rebuild it, taking the cloud into mind and how it's going to be designed. Next, you want to decide what hosting options are right for the platform. Many people think initially public cloud is the right way to go because that's always the default path or has been in the past, but that's not necessarily the case anymore. It still makes a sense for a lot of workloads, but there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration before jumping into a public cloud model. You want to make sure that the application services you put out there has adequate bandwidth to other services or on-premise services that needs to continue to communicate even during the migration process. And you also want to make sure you have a cost management process in place, because cloud can definitely help you manage how you cost and control things, but we've seen that it can also get out of hand if you don't have a solid management process in place. So you want to make sure you don't go over budget or have some unseen costs in the future. Another consideration is a private cloud or something that would be running in your on-premise or hosted facility. And that would provide you cloud-like capabilities within your data center or hosting facility without having to go public cloud and taking on some of those concerns that you might have around network bandwidth and cost management or other resources. One option is looking at a hyper-converged infrastructure that can provide you an all-in-one solution, server, network storage, and your virtualization layer that helps minimize a lot of your maintenance and management and provide you a little bit more of a cloud-like type experience. However, it's still more of at that infrastructure as a service layer. Other options include AWS Outpost, which was released recently, that provides you AWS capabilities on-premise within your data center so that you don't have to go outside of your data center to get that cloud-like capability. The final option might be looking at best of both worlds, where you want to have your on-premise workloads for certain things, but yet want that flexibility and management control within the cloud for other workloads. And you also might want to shift those workloads back and forth as your demand changes. And that way you can prevent costly infrastructure expenses if you have a short-term growth in your organization that you want to manage. There are a lot of options around hybrid that are available today, and that continues to grow. VMware has multiple hybrid options that allow you to move workloads from on-premise VMware vSphere clusters to AWS or other clusters. Azure also provides multiple hybrid options as well as AWS. And like I said, this continues to grow as manufacturers continue to see the value and be able to move workloads to and from the cloud to help offset what on-premise workloads are there. So the final piece is understanding what the right service model is. And as you've gone through all these steps, you've already pretty much defined this as you look through it. So infrastructure as a service makes sense if you're looking to rehost an application and just have it sitting on a compute node and leveraging storage to operate. And so it provides you kind of a pay-as-you-grow infrastructure, so you can still have that scalability and scale up and down, but you're not going to have all of the capabilities that cloud can provide you. Platform as a service will provide you more value and will enable you to re-platform services into this environment. And that way you can deploy your applications of services directly into the cloud service and use the product as you need to support your business. Refactoring would potentially go into a software as a service model, which is a ready to go service that you can use and consume right away, requiring minimal changes from a cloud perspective, but your app would have to be reconsidered and redesigned, and your business could be impacted greatly by that. So you have to take those considerations in place as you kind of think through that process. And the final option, which is a more recent term that has come up, is anything as a service, which is kind of that other bucket, if you will. As services continue to come up and to get defined and evaluated, there's a lot of different options, and it will continue to grow as the cloud continues to mature. Ultimately, the goal is to have the right technology to meet your business needs. O'Reilly, the book company, not the auto parts company, completed a study of 590 participants that were made up of subject matter experts to executives. Half stated the lack of skills were their top challenge in being able to adopt cloud properly. So let's see how we can ensure that you're prepared for that. Once the technology is selected, what skills and experience do you need to be successful? You want to review your current team skills and capabilities and take an evaluation of that closely. You want to evaluate what gaps you have and really what you need to be successful. Once you have that understood, have a solid plan put together that includes what training you need, what staff you need, and what overall team needs to look like. This is a good time to consider a strategic partner in order to be able to get guidance on this plan. They can provide immediate experienced staff to help make sure that you have the right skills right away. They can provide mentoring to your existing in-house staff as well as on-the-job training so they come up to speed as they're working through the project. They can also provide best practice experience because they've been there, they've done that. And so you want to leverage that experience so that you can learn from their challenges and issues they've had in the past with other clients. And last, you want to make sure you understand the difference between migration and support skills because there are different skills required for each of those. Once you've completed your migration and you get into that support mode, many organizations consider managed service providers to help focus on that long-term support so that your organization can continue to focus on business strategic objectives within your IT organization. Another survey completed a few years ago, 96% of companies surveyed said it took more time and money than planned to move to the cloud. So what kind of things can we do to prevent that? Well, before jumping into the project, you want to make sure you understand what the time commitment is, what staff's needed, how's this going to impact your budget, when is the staff going to be required. Once you figure that out, you want to make sure you dedicate staff to the project to ensure that you're on schedule and you don't have project delays. But then you also want to understand how this could impact other work and projects within your organization because the cloud project is not going to be your only project. A lack of focus and balance can really lead to project delays and ultimately failures at some point. And we've seen that happen in the past at other organizations. Having a partner at this time can save time and ensure your project is a success. They can provide dedicated resources that can focus on your project. And before you even begin, they can provide a detailed plan and cost analysis up front. So you'll know right away how it's going to impact your budget and how it may impact other projects as it's being rolled out. They'll provide measurable milestones so that's broken up, kind of what mentioned before, into digestible phases, and you'll see the value as each phase is completed. Many projects fail due to change of priorities. Cloud is no different. Looking at a success story with a utility company we've been working with for a long time, their core business were having some challenges. They were having system failures and downtime that was costing them business impacts. They were having poor performance and slow response, and that was leading to work delays. They had high security risks due to very old software and hardware that provided limited, if any, patching capabilities, as well as very little support available if they ran into issues. And finally, they were working with a hosting facility that was very expensive and also providing poor services. So looking at what the technology decision needed to be, we worked closely with the customer and reviewed their current system and understood what their requirements would be going forward of this environment. After this analysis, we decided with the customer that we should continue to work using the Oracle stack, which was a big goal because they were using this product stack as a while, but we were able to look at newer versions of these products as we considered their requirements. Other requirement was to reduce complexity and overall risk to their environment. So we re-platformed this customer to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, implementing the latest software and latest patches in their environment. We were able to remove hardware and virtualization overhead management from their environment to help simplify the overall management of the environment. We were able to leverage cloud capabilities to add more security, such as a proxy load balancer to provide an external facing layer that was not there prior. We also were able to implement an application firewall to help prevent unwanted traffic that we weren't able to block before. The customer also acknowledged that they didn't have the right skills to get this project completed after they evaluated this. So they worked closely with Zirous to ensure the planning was in place, the migration was successful, and we had a support plan in place. And today, Zirous continues to provide long-term support through managed services to this customer. We provide them routine health check reports so they understand what their environment looks like and what the performance of that environment is. Before you start, you want to make sure that you have a solid time and plan investment, and Zirous provided a detailed plan and cost estimate before the project got kicked off. This was able to help the client see what their budget constraints would be and make sure that it didn't impact with their other projects they had going on. Ultimately, we implemented the project on budget and saved them $40,000 a year by removing their old hosting provider. Now the customer can focus on business initiatives while their partner focused on the migration and continues to focus on providing ongoing support.
So once you get to the cloud, it doesn't really end there. And so we like to think of it as the story that never ends because there's always something to improve and always something to enhance. And we like to think the number one way to prevent success or growth is by doing nothing, by not changing and not adapting to new ways to do things. So again, cloud is a journey and not a destination. Once you are in the cloud, the real fun can begin. Most of the cloud benefits come from utilizing native technologies that make processes more efficient, more cost-effective than traditional infrastructure. If you've opted to lift and shift in the cloud first, the next steps would be to break down that traditional infrastructure setup and decouple technologies to gain the speed and agility that cloud really provides. And to do this, you want to look back at your business goals and priorities first. Have things changed or shifted since they were first defined? Chances are they might have in the past 6 months. How do those changes affect the roadmap that has been laid out? If there's changes to be made, you want to get those done before you make any technology changes. So it's a good idea to consistently look back at them and realign your technology with the changes happening. And you want to include your cloud enablement team on these changes. They'll be making the decisions throughout this whole process, so they'll have a good idea of what needs to come next. And this team would really feel better about what's happening within the organization as well as the future of the organization as well. So a review of the processes and services needed to verify all the dependencies that are needed in the next changes and map out those changes that need to happen. Having everybody on board and communicating those changes to the affected users is important before blindsiding them with something that's out of the blue. So again, just regular communication and reevaluation is really key when looking at cloud enhancements. Many of the optimizations look at better ways to manage costs. So if resources need to be resized or processes need to be redesigned to become more cost efficient, those are great ways to show value of the cloud with keeping costs down. There's also value in adding automated processes instead of your manual processes so that you can leverage the cloud benefits of reducing human error and processing data in a much quicker way. So all of this really works towards making the most out of your infrastructure. One of the ways we've seen this happen is with a testing company client of ours that we've been working with for a few years on a data engineering project. So again, cloud is one of those great platforms that you can leverage other areas as well. So we've seen analytics and data engineering being a really great liftoff from your cloud environment. So with this one, they already had a large existing environment, and we came in and helped them with a lot of different initiatives. One of those being a process to digest and load data from a third party into their RDS. So they would need to load it from a CSV file into their database. And the proposed solution was to put it on a small EC2 instance that would just run 24/7. Whenever that file comes, it would just be put onto the EC2 instance. Our consultant recognized a better and more efficient process for this. So instead, they recommended using AWS step functions with multiple lambdas. So that you were able to parse that file and load the data onto the database just using the compute processes. So this allowed our client to only pay for the resources being used and be more efficient while implementing more exciting, not exciting, but new technologies. So just innovating and saving money along the way. Another way they've done this is improving security with API gateways. So they have many third-party and internal APIs that are being used. And to add a layer of security, they're able to use API gateway to manage that and understand which users are using those APIs and how frequently they're being used and what they're being used for. So it's a great way to add that extra layer of security. They also use auto-scaling. So the APIs that sit on the EC2 instances are able to meet the API request demand by scaling to meet that demand. So for low request days, it's smaller. With greater demand, it can scale up to meet it. So the end users don't see a lag in performance, but again, only paying for what they're using and being able to scale to meet that demand. These are just a few examples of how processes and optimizations can occur. So it can be just small, little initiatives that make a big impact. So it all adds up together. And it can be unique for every organization. There's different priorities and different goals that each company has, and each enhancement can work towards those goals. Now, Bruce will get started about how we can get started.
So now those pieces are in place that we've went through. Let's look at what those next steps are to make sure you get your cloud journey going. As we mentioned, it's really important to have your leadership in a cloud mindset, so that they're fully engaged for this cloud journey you're kicking off or you're already in. And having them on board and fully engaged will just help make getting other business teams involved less painful. You also want to make sure you have that cloud enablement team established very quickly. Even if it starts out small, like Tally mentioned, it's really important to be successful for your overall cloud adoption. You also want to have a solid plan in getting your cloud training so that you have the right skills and expertise to support the cloud endeavor. You want to make sure you have that inventory of your applications and infrastructure of your data center or cloud services as it is today, so that as you migrate into the cloud, you can continue to update that and see how you move from one workload to another and continue to enhance it. And finally, you want to make sure you get a partner engaged so they can provide you best practice experience and expertise so that you're successful through your project. So who is your partner? If you don't have one, as mentioned, it's really important to have one working with you side by side and making sure they're the right partner, because that can make the difference in being successful. You want to evaluate your options so that you make sure you have someone by your side that has your best interest in mind and not just out to get a dollar. So Zirous has a few different resources that could help you with your journey and maybe understand a little bit more information. We've got an ebook that most of this presentation is based on, called The Cloud Adoption Journey Beyond the Technology. We've got more details around the Catalyst process that Tally went through. We've got a Cloud and Croissant session that is free one-on-one session with your organization to help educate you and talk about what your cloud current cloud or potential cloud challenges are. Or you can look at our virtual workshop, which is a little bit deeper dive option for free that will enable us to kickstart your journey to the cloud or help get it on track. We also have multiple cloud blogs from our expert staff that you can review. So now we'll open it up for questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bruce and Tally, for all that great information. I personally think cloud is really exciting, and I hope that our audience does too, now that we've been through each of these sections talking about it. So we do have a few questions that came in, and I'll read those to you, and you guys can tackle those. So our first question is, my contract with my data center doesn't come up for over a year. How long prior to that should I start considering moving to the cloud and planning that process?
Okay, I'll take that one. So no matter where you are with your process contracts and where your data center sits, it's important to have a plan in place. So even if you're a year out and you've got a substantial portion of your data center running in an environment that you can't get out of, it's never too soon to start planning how you will exit that data center, or to start looking at some workloads you can move sooner than later and slowly migrate out of that data center so that by the time that contract's over, it's really easy to exit it in a smooth transition and be able to ensure that you're at the right end state for your organization.
Perfect. Thank you, Bruce. We've got one question diving a little bit into the business aspects that we're talking about. So they're asking, does every area of my business really need to be involved in our cloud initiative? For example, what about the HR department?
That's a great question, and I'll take that one. So one aspect of it is the people side of it. So who do you have in your organization that has the cloud skills? The HR department might need to look for new skills, new people, new resources. So they might get affected just solely on the people side of things. And also on the technology side of things, their HRMS system could be moving to the cloud, and they could have a different user experience or potential outages as migrations happen that they could get impacted later down the road. So again, there's the technology side of it, but there's also the people and resource side of it as well. So it could be for any department, but HR is a great example of both people and technology being impacted.
Thanks, Talia. I think that's a great point, that could be true for any department, even those that seem like they really only focus on the business. Cloud might impact them as well. Okay, we've got a couple more technical questions here. First one, I have a large VMware footprint. Is there any value in moving any of it to VMware on AWS?
That's a good question, and I'll take that one. So using VMware on AWS is just an extension of your existing vSphere cluster. And you can ideally move some of the workloads that fluctuate and change from your on-premise cluster to your AWS environment. And you don't have to deal with high network bandwidth requirements if you move the right applications properly. So you have to have a solid plan in place. So putting those workloads would provide you more resource and flexibility without having to purchase additional ESX hosts or storage for your on-premise environment, and be able to handle budget constraints as they come up, because right now with what we're dealing with, there's a lot of budget constraints that are impacting a lot of organizations. So it's important to make sure you keep that in mind.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, we've got another one here with kind of talking about their current situation. So they say, I have Office 365 and SharePoint Online today, but still have some on-premises workloads as well, such as Oracle Business Intelligence and some databases. Which platforms should we consider to move these to the cloud?
I'll take that one. Taking the process that I went through earlier into consideration, you really want to weigh your options between lift and shift to Azure, or how would moving these products into an Azure environment impact your license model, or do you want to look at a multi-cloud option and go with Oracle Analytics Server, which is Oracle's new version of OBIEE, and some customers are considering moving to that. It really comes down to the longevity of the service and really how the business is using that service and what it looks like for the future. Oracle may not be the right target platform. You might want to look at other products that would meet the business needs and be able to provide you more flexibility in the cloud.
Great, thank you. And we have just one more question, and I think this is really a good closing question, kind of summarizes what we've talked about here today. So this question is, we already have several applications in the cloud, so what should we do to make sure that our strategy will be effective in the end? So kind of they're already in this process, how do they make sure that they're doing it right?
Yeah, that is a really great question. And you have a start if you have some applications already in the cloud. So that's a great start. And those applications should really be included in your application inventory. So when you're doing that planning, make sure it's still listed, even though you don't think you have to think about it anymore. There still could be some dependencies or processes that could get changed. So keep that in mind when you're doing that strategy, but it could end up being a multi-cloud strategy. It could be the same cloud. It depends on what you've learned from those applications being in the cloud. So if something went really well, make sure you do that the next time as well. If something didn't go wrong, learn from that and reevaluate. Again, just making sure you have a constant feedback loop of how did this go? What can we do differently? Is really great in defining that strategy and reevaluating that strategy as well. So that's a great question.
Awesome, thanks, Tally. Okay, that wraps up our questions for today. So we'll go ahead and close. I want to thank Bruce and Tally again for sharing all this great content with us. We hope it was valuable to you. Watch out for tomorrow an email to receive the on-demand version of this webinar, and we'll also include some additional resources, some of the ones that Bruce mentioned on the previous slide, and a couple others that can kind of help you get started on this journey or make sure you're on the right track, like Tally was just saying, by reevaluating. So thanks again, everyone, and we hope you have a great afternoon.